Jai.
Siddham Radha Damodar Bhagwan Ki
Jai.
Thy Gaur Hari Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol. Class time. Hare Krishna. This is Hare Krishna. Is it working? Hare Krishna. Yeah, I can't hear anything either. So.
It was working when I started.
Oh, there you go. Doesn't want to work for me, I think. That's fine. Looks like it's going to be without the mic. Ah. Usually works for everything.
Yeah,
No.
it was working. I don't know what happened.
That's fine. I'll just speak loudly. I don't know if. Can everyone hear me at the back? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Just speak. So, before we start, I'll just offer some prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Takshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashat Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I remember some of you from last time, not everyone. So I think lots of people are new this time. So that's good. So last time we discussed about, we discussed a topic from Damodar Ashtakam, which is what we sing usually at the end of the program. We talked about Satchidananda last time. And we spoke about what the significance of Satchidananda is in our lives, whether it's relevant to us or not. So we discussed that last year. I don't know how many of you remember that, but if you don't remember it, that works well in my favor because I might repeat some sections. So that's good. So actually yesterday we had another program and Mataji requested that I speak on, we have so many problems in our lives and how do we deal with problems in our life and how do we navigate through problems in our life. Initially, I thought, oh my God, that's such a broad topic. But then the more I thought about it, I thought that's actually quite relevant and a pretty thoughtful topic because it's relevant to everyone. In fact, so much so that it is said that the only person that does not have problems is a dead man. So basically, if someone is living, they're going to have some kind of problems in their life. In fact, the moment, as soon as someone is born, problems start in their life. There's no life without problems. So that's why I thought that's good. Some people deal with problems well. Some people don't deal with problems well. So the question is, how do we deal with them and whether or not the way we deal with problems is actually going to help us in the future or not. So the way we look at problems can actually, the whole scenario, I was thinking, okay, how am I going to speak about this? So then the best place to speak about this from is from Bhagavad Gita, actually. So if you look at Bhagavad Gita, there are 18 chapters in Bhagavad Gita. The very first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is when Arjuna observes the armies. So when the battle is just about to start, at that time, Arjuna is faced with a huge problem because on one side he has his brothers and he has Krishna, but then on the other side he has his other cousin brothers. In fact, not just 5 of them, but 100 of them. And it includes all of his grandfather, it includes his uncles, it includes his teachers, everyone. All the people whom he used to respect were on the other side. So Arjuna was faced with a huge problem because he knew that if this battle continues, then either one side will be completely wiped or the other. So there was going to be a huge massacre. So Arjun was in a huge problem because his whole life they had faced lots of problems. If you examine the life of the Pandavas, they had suffered significantly because even though they were meant to be the rightful heirs, so from the age of 6, Duryodhan started to employ different tricks to kill them. Like that's when Bhima was 6 years old, at that time he was poisoned so that he could die. Then when they reached 13 or 14 years, they built a wax house to burn all of the Pandavas. And then slowly we see that their whole life was just full of problems. Then they cheated with them in a gambling match. The Kauravas cheated against them, put them into the forest for 13 years. And then after that, they decided that they would not give them even an iota of land so that they could rule. So their whole life was filled with problems. But Arjuna did not care about those as much. The most significant problem he had was when he was faced on the battlefield against his own relatives. So now the question he had was, like he had lots of different problems. First problem he was thinking that how can I kill my own grandfather? Because my grandfather was, always affectionate to me. How can I kill him? He said, I learned the art of fighting from my teacher. So how can I kill my teacher? Then he said, actually all of these Kauravas, they are actually all my cousin brothers. So how can I kill them to enjoy a kingdom? So he was overcome with lots of doubts, lots of anxieties, so much so that it's described in Bhagavad Gita that his limbs started shaking and his voice started choking, and his Gandhi from his hand, it slipped away. Now if Gandiva slips away from Arjuna's hand, it must be something very significant. And basically we see that he was very much disturbed by that. So then what does he do? So the first thing he does is he approaches Krishna. So we see that if we look at different types of problems we have in our life, we can kind of like divide them up based on hierarchy. You can see there are many different types of problems also. There are some problems that we get on the bodily level. Like, like when we are born, we get lots of diseases. So as soon as we are born, sometimes like, kids, they get jaundice. Then you have to like give them vaccinations and things like that. And then we see that they get RSV. You have to take them to kids emergency department. Yeah, so then they will give them some steroids. And then slowly as the kids grow up, they start getting more sick. Like they may get gastroenteritis. All of these things. So until a man dies, they are constantly bound by diseases. So diseases affect a man throughout their life. Man and woman nowadays, you have to say that also. So yeah, so it affects people nowadays. Yeah. So on the bodily level, there are lots of problems. These are problems that are created by the own body. Then you have problems that are created by other living entities. So like for example, like when the kid goes to school, then there may be people who are bullying the kid, Or when you go to office, there may be other people who are trying to climb higher than you, for example. So these kinds of things, there are other living entities who cause lots of problems also. Then on the third hand, even if it's not people or other living entities, it could be natural calamities which are causing problems, like too much sun or too much heat, too much rain, natural disasters. These cause lots of problems, like COVID. These things can cause lots of problems. So actually our whole life is filled with problems which affect the body. But the thing is, these problems only affect the body. Then we see that there are actually lots of problems which can affect the mind also. So what kinds of problems affect the mind? We see nowadays, like if you look at the spread of diseases that happen in different populations, the most common disease or the most common disorder that we see in the ages between 25 and 35 is, does anyone know what disorder we see most commonly in the ages of, 25 and 35 is depression. So depression, anxiety. So these are problems of the mind. Like people are trying to succeed in their lives and then they may or may not be capable of doing that, but then there is so much pressure on them externally that they need to succeed, etc. And they maybe have pressure even from inside. Like in India, we see so many people commit suicides, like kids when they don't get into their respective, whatever they want to get into. If they're not able to get in, they commit suicide also. So these problems are real. And so many like pharmaceutical companies make lots of money from antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs because so many people are experiencing these disorders. So these are problems of the mind. Then if we go higher, there are problems of the intelligence also. So what are problems of the intelligence? Problems of the intelligence are those which require us to use our finer discrimination skills. So ethical dilemmas, moral dilemmas, these kinds of things are problems of the mind. Like you may be forced to choose between, let's say, some act which may benefit your family versus some act which benefits the whole society. You may be forced to sacrifice something, a lower ideal for a higher ideal. And these require some moral judgments. So You might find, especially for those who are leaders, like especially those who are leaders in a particular society, they have to sacrifice their own personal interests so that they can do well for the others. So these people face lots of ethical dilemmas also, like how am I meant to administer properly? So you can see these kinds of problems happen at all different levels. At the last level you have problems of the soul also. So what are the problems of the soul? The biggest problem of the soul is dissatisfaction. So dissatisfaction is when you are not satisfied with doing something and you feel like your heart is empty from the inside. You feel like there is something missing in life. Now that generally doesn't come from the mind or the intelligence, that actually comes from the soul. It comes from the inside. So then when we have these kinds of problems, so Arjuna experienced all of these problems at different levels. So then what did he do? So the first thing he did was he surrendered to Krishna. So he surrendered to Krishna and he asked Krishna, he said, like I've got all of these problems, so what should I do? So then we see, what does Krishna say? So Krishna, before he addresses the problems or how to solve all of these problems, Krishna teaches Arjuna. He says that you are not the body, you are the soul. He says to actually solve any kind of problem that you have in this world, the first thing you need to understand is that we are not the body and we are the soul. Now you might think that's a very strange place to start. Like, why are we starting at this? Like, Arjuna was worried about whether I should fight or not. But Krishna starts the discussion with whether or not you're the body or whether or not you're the soul. Now this might seem like a very strange place to start, but actually that makes perfect sense. First, we need to get the foundations right. If the foundations are not right, then you won't be able to solve the problem. Like, let's say you want to solve the problem of cancer, for example, let's just say. I mean, it's a very broad topic, and I know lots of medical people are here. So when I say you want to solve the problem of cancer, it sounds a bit weird. But okay, let's just pick a cancer. Let's say one of our relatives passed away due to colorectal cancer. So then I might have this desire that, like I want to solve this problem of colorectal cancer throughout the world. But then I need to look at where I am. Like, what am I? I am a high school graduate. How am I going to solve this problem of colorectal cancer? So then the first thing I need to do is I need to get into medical school, or the first thing I need to do is study biomedical science, whatever field you want to study. So then when he goes and he studies that field, he gets some basics, he gets some understanding, and then once you get that understanding, you practice in that field, and then you become an expert, and then you may be able to solve some of these problems. You might be able to determine which gene or which mutation happens which causes this cancer, and then you may be able to prevent it or fix it eventually. So you can see that to solve any of these problems, first you need to get the basics right. So when the basics are taught, the idea is that you build a very strong foundation and then you can see things clearly. So when Krishna explains this concept of, you are not the body and you are actually the soul, what Krishna is trying to do is he's trying to point out to Arjuna that actually you should start to see at this level. So whenever we have any problems, we should see, okay, the problem I have, is this problem arising from the body? Is this arising from the mind? Is this arising from the intelligence? Or is this arising from my soul? So that, to understand that level, you need to get some basic knowledge. Why? Because the solution also depends on where the problem is. Like, if you have a problem of the body, you cannot solve it at the level of the soul. Like, for example, if you have malaria, you can't say, okay, well, I'm just going to go and sit in the temple and my malaria will go away. No, because it's a problem of the body, you need to have some bodily solution for that. So similarly, that's the reason. Let's say you have some ethical dilemma. You can't say, okay, well, I'll just go and eat chocolate and that will help me solve my problem. Why? Because the problem is on the level of the intelligence, but we are engaging in acts of the body. So that's why it's very important for us to first understand that we are the soul and we are not the body. So Krishna then explains that, he goes on to explain that actually the soul is what continues from boyhood to youth, youth to old age to death, and continues in the next life also. He says that the body changes. So just like we put on new clothes, and at the end of the day we change those clothes and we put on new ones, similarly he explains that the soul also discards one type of body and then eventually takes up another type of body. And this change of bodies is known as the repeated cycle of birth and death. So Krishna explains this, and theoretically it makes sense. It makes sense that, just like changing, like we know that, for example, even from medical science, we know that within 1 year, 98% of atoms in our body completely change. Like for example, if you look at the start of 2024 to the end of 2024, 98% of our atoms inside our body have completely changed. So the body has completely changed. But what remains? So if you look at the body, if you look at, like subsequent years, all the way from when we were born to who we are right now, do we say we are the same person? Yeah, we'll have to say we are the same person because we remember, we have some experiences, we have some memories, etc. But the body has completely changed. So we have to understand that we are not actually this body. This body that we are currently will change eventually. And this body that we are currently is not the one we were born with. It was completely different back in the day. So that's why we have to understand that we are actually the soul and we are not the body. So once we understand that, then we can think in terms of that. Then we can start thinking and analyzing problems at the level of different things. So at the level of the body, mind, intelligence, and ego. So okay, so after Krishna explains that you are the soul and you are not the body, then what does Krishna do? So then Krishna explains that actually once you understand that, he said you have to then understand what type of body you have. So you might say, okay, well, he's just explained we are the soul, but now he's saying you need to understand what type of body you have. Why is that? Because different types of bodies have different functions. Like, let me give you an example. Like, let's say you take a fish. Fish love to swim in water. Now, if you take a fish out of the water, fish is not going to survive. It will die. Similarly, if you take a cow, you can't take a cow and put it in water because cow will not survive in water. Cow needs to live on land. Similarly, there are different types of bodies, Krishna explains. He says that predominantly in a general way, he explains there are 4 different types of bodies. What are those 4 different types of bodies? Those are, nowadays these terms are very polarizing, but actually these are very philosophical terms. And those are the bodies of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So everyone has innate characteristics which enable one to act in a particular way. So Krishna explains that someone who has Brahminical traits, essentially Krishna explains that firstly, like, to explain this, we have to understand that the caste system that is practiced nowadays is not the original Varnashrama system that was there in the Vedic times. In the Vedic times, one's Varna and Ashrama was determined by their character. Krishna says, Chaturvarnyam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha, which means that by one's guna and by one's karma, one's Varna and Ashrama was decided. So by one's guna means, guna is one's qualities. So some people have a Brahminical quality. Like Brahminical qualities are what? Brahminical qualities means these people like to live a simple life. They're not interested in, I want to climb to the top ranks of my career, for example. These people want to live a simple, peaceful life. They're more interested in, doing pious things. They want to do religious things. They're more interested in cultivating knowledge. They're more interested in teaching other people, like teachers are there, for example. They like to teach other people as well. So these are characteristics of Brahmanas. So we have to understand if someone has qualities of a Brahmana, they need to understand that. Because if you take a Brahmana and put them somewhere else, it may not be very conducive for them. So then you have Kshatriyas. What do Kshatriyas do? Kshatriyas are generally involved in warfare. They're generally military men. And they're also able administrators. So these people are generally in the top ranks of management. So these people like to manage people. They like to, listen to lots of complaints, and they like to execute different functions. Now, it's not for everyone. Because actually, just a sidetrack, there was one saint, his name was Saint Francis. He used to live in Italy. And he used to manage a very large church in Venice. They used to get over 10,000 people. This was very long time ago. This is 1,000 years ago. And one day, Saint Francis had to go from Venice to somewhere else. So he appointed another person, another bishop to basically manage that place. So he said that I'll be back in 1 week, and in 1 week I'll take back the management. So you just manage everything for 1 week. So he left, and then when he came back, he found out that the bishop whom he had left in charge actually died on the 3rd day of his management, because he just could not deal with the stress. Because managing people is a lot of stress. You have so many complaints, you have so many different people who are disagreeing, so many different opinions, etc. So he probably got like some Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, and he passed away. Yeah, so stress, yeah. So like that, it is there. So some people cannot deal with that level of stress. So that's why it's important to identify our different bodily type also. Some people are Vaishyas. Vaishyas means these people are very business minded. Like in anything they see, they can see money. Like, I mean, I don't want to be racist, but it's a fact that, like Gujaratis, for example, they're expert in business. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a poor Gujarati. I've never seen a poor Gujarati. Like, you can take a Gujarati and put them anywhere and they will make money. Like, for a very nice example, like, like when the Gujaratis were living in Africa, like South Africa and in Kenya, then over there the local people revolted and, like they took away all of their property and everything, and then they forced them to quit. So these people, they left as refugees and they went to UK. And then they started from scratch in UK, and then they just made their own businesses and they're doing very well. So like, I mean, for Gujaratis, it's very natural to do business. So for some people, it is very natural to do business also. So those people are Vaishyas. Then on the other hand, on the last scale, you have Shudras. Now this is a very polarizing term nowadays. But actually Shudra is one who does some kind of service or does some kind of job, which includes probably majority of us. So these people, we cannot do any kind of management. We cannot go into the army and fight. And we don't like living simple lives. So actually it's not a bad thing. So Shudras were never disrespected in Vedic culture. In fact, if you see the sacrifice that Dashrath Maharaj had performed, after he had performed the Ashwamedha Yagya for, Putra Kameshti Yagya to beget children, the very first people he honored after that Yagya was the Shudras. So the Shudras are very well honored in Vedic culture. So it's not that we put someone down and put someone up, but the idea is that everyone has their different roles and everyone has their different jobs as well. So a lot of people just want to do their 9-to-5 job, come home and just relax, like they don't want to do all this other thing, like when they're going to India, take phone calls about their business, for example. Yeah, so we have to understand our nature also. And then when we understand our nature, Krishna says that itself will solve a lot of your bodily problems. So a lot of bodily problems occur to us because, a lot of mental problems occur to us because we are of a different nature and we are engaged in a different type of work. So Krishna says that actually first you have to identify, he tells Arjuna that you are a Kshatriya. He says that because Arjuna was saying, I do not want to fight. I would rather become a sannyasi and I would rather go and beg from door to door than kill my own family members. So Krishna says that even if you decide to quit your duty as a Kshatriya and you go to and become a sannyasi, he says you will still be dissatisfied in your heart because your nature is not that to become a sannyasi. Your nature is to become a Kshatriya. Then he explains that if you do your Kshatriya dharma properly, he says, regardless of the outcome, you will benefit. He says, how? He says, if you win, you will enjoy the kingdom. He says, if you lose, that's fine. You will go to the heavenly planets. You will go to Swarga. So he says, actually for you, there is no loss. So if you engage in your duty as a Kshatriya, he says, there is no loss for you. And he says, this is your natural duty. So this is your nature. So you will eventually end up doing that anyways. So he says, Krishna explains that if you understand your bodily makeup, you can solve majority of your problems. But despite that, of course, there's a but. Otherwise, Bhagavad Gita would finish there. So yeah, there is a big but there. So, but the problem is that when we are performing our duties and when we are performing our activities in this material world, what tends to happen is that we get attached to our activities and we start having some expectations. Like let's say you're a Brahmana and you're performing your duties. The biggest quality of a Brahmana is that they are very peaceful in their mind and they get a lot of satisfaction from performing tapasya and yagya and tapasya. They do yagyas and they do tapasya and they become very satisfied because of that. Now the problem is when the Brahmana is not able to do the yagya or the tapasya because of some bodily disease or because of some society stress or something is happening in society, some turmoil or ingredients are not there. If he's not able to perform his yagya, then he becomes distressed. Kshatriya, like for example, we see in the case of the Pandavas, if they don't receive their share of land to rule on, they themselves will become very dissatisfied. And then we see Vaishyas. If Vaishyas are deprived of money and if they are not given appropriate resources, they themselves will also become very agitated and stressed. And same thing with Shudras. If they don't have a right master, they will just fight amongst themselves and just kill everyone, which we see in anarchy. So Actually, everyone will be dissatisfied. So that is a major problem. And we see that from time to time. In our lives, that will happen because, as we know, nothing in this world goes straight. Like, if everything in this world is going straight, then there's definitely a problem. So we know that there are lots of different types of problems. And when a Brahmana is, or Kshatriya, when they're not receiving what they want, then at that time they become disturbed in their mind. So then Krishna brings in another topic. And he says that while you're performing your duty as a Brahmana, as a Kshatriya, as a Vaishya, or as a Shudra, you should learn to become detached from this world. So then he brings in this topic of detachment. Now, why does Krishna bring this topic of detachment, and what is detachment? Detachment doesn't mean that we just leave all of our duties and we go into the forest and just chill. Detachment means that we don't have any expectations, or our happiness does not depend on anything in this world. That is what detachment means. So, like for example, often it is said that there is a very common saying. I'm just trying to word it actually. They say that who enjoys, let's say when you have a newborn baby. Sorry, you'll hear some newborn baby examples now, quite a few. So yeah, no coincidence. That's right. So when there is a newborn baby, who enjoys the newborn baby the most? Mother, dad. Grandparents. Grandparents tend to enjoy the children the most. And that's a very age-old saying actually. Why is that? Because the parents are too much attached and they're doing too many duties. They want their child to be, I want this child to grow up and fulfill this expectation of mine, do this, do that, etc. Why are they not performing well in school, etc. Whereas grandparents are like, just chill, not my responsibility. Like, I'll just play with the child and then, that's good for me, like that. So grandparents are more, they enjoy the children more. And we see that the reason is they're a bit more detached. It's not that they don't have any duties, they've already completed their duties. But the idea is that their sense of happiness does not come from the outcome. So they're not really interested in the long-term or immediate short-term outcome of the child. They're more interested in spending time with the child and just enjoying the company of the child. They're not really that much interested in doing long-term planning for them. So that is why this sense of detachment comes in. So detachment means that our happiness does not rely on something that is immediate. So what does that mean for a Brahmana or for a Kshatriya or for a Vaishya or a Shudra? This means that, the sources of happiness. So for a Kshatriya, the source of happiness is to rule over other people. Or for a Brahmana, it is to perform yajna and tapasya, or to teach other people. You start to develop a sense, so you basically start to find happiness inside yourself rather than trying to find happiness in the activities that you're doing. So that is what Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, that now you need to start practicing detachment. So try to become detached from all of these other things that you're doing in this material world and try to make the source of your happiness come from inside. That is why Krishna says, there is that famous statement in Bhagavad Gita, I'm sure all of you know that one. Karmanye vadhika raste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phal hetur bhur ma te sangos sorry, I'm just a bit dyslexic, but that's the verse essentially. So what does Krishna say? So Krishna is saying that you have the right to perform your duty, but don't become attached to the results. So it's not that we should not expect results. That's not the meaning of that verse. What Krishna is saying is we should not become attached to the results of our work. What does that mean? That means that, okay, I am performing my duty. I am doing my duty as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, as a doctor, as a teacher, whatever. I'm doing my duty. But the fact is that, the outcome of, when will my patient get cured? Like, we genuinely do care about our patients getting cured. But we have to understand that there are many, many other factors that are there which enable whether the patient will be cured or not. So we have to have this broad sense of understanding that it's not just our activity which causes or which creates a result in this world. There are multiple different factors which will help or which will determine whether the patient gets better or not. So in that sense, you become a little detached from what you're doing. So you do your duty as a matter of duty. You do your occupation as a matter of duty, but you're not intensely expecting results, and you don't become disheartened when you're not expecting your results. So that certain level of detachment should start to come in. And that is what Krishna is teaching Arjuna. That unless this detachment starts coming in, he says you will constantly become distressed. And this is a great source of misery for lots of people. Because when people start expecting results that are completely beyond their control, that they cannot control, then people start to get distressed, and lots of mental disorders may happen at that time. Anxiety, people may become distressed, etc. Like for example, like we see that, of course it can be quite distressing, but like let's say someone wants to buy a property and the market is not suitable at this time, like then you become like very distressed, like okay, well, what am I going to do, where am I going to live, etc., etc. But if you're a little bit detached, you will just take it a little bit patiently, like okay, that's fine, these things are not under my control, so I'll take it a bit patiently, and then eventually when time allows, it will suffice. Like whatever I'm meant to get, I will eventually get, and then you eventually will, like we know, like now the property market has stabilized anyways, so that, at least that's what they're saying. So yeah, so like that, like if you are extremely attached to your own results, then things can be problematic. So that is why Krishna says that we need to practice a certain level of detachment. So what is another way of practicing detachment? So there's one way I've explained in this way, that your happiness does not depend on the outcome of your job or the outcome of your activities. But the other way of practicing detachment is to actually dedicate the results of our activities to Krishna or to God. So when we dedicate the results of our activities, then we are telling Krishna that whatever I'm doing is actually just my duty, and whatever result I'm getting is a benediction from you. So what I'm going to do with this is, I'm going to take this and offer it back to you. So you might think that what kind of detachment is this? And actually this is the perfect type of detachment. The reason this is the perfect type of detachment is because we know that we have been put in this situation by the mercy of God. It's not that, like they say that to raise a child, it requires a village. Have you heard that saying? Yeah. What does that mean? It means that we are not the sole person responsible for our success. There are many, many different factors. So this statement only recognizes a village, but actually if you think about it, the whole universe is responsible for raising one living entity even. Yeah, like all forces need to be in the correct place for one living entity to grow. And ultimately behind the universe, there is the Supreme Lord, or there is Krishna, who is maintaining it all. So Krishna is ultimately responsible for maintaining all of us. And when Krishna maintains us, we develop a natural sense of gratitude towards Krishna, that okay, thank you Krishna, that you have given me this opportunity where I'm able to serve people, and I'm able to serve you, and I'm able to serve the devotees. So as a natural gratitude, we offer whatever Krishna has given us back to him. It's like, there's a very nice example that our spiritual leaders quote. They say that, like, let's say there's a 5-year-old child, and he finds out that his father's birthday is coming up. So he goes to his mother and he says that, Mom, please give me some money. I want to buy a gift for my father. So he takes some money from the mother. Well, mom says, like, you're a 5-year-old child. What are you going to buy? Let's go to the market. So then mom takes the child to the market. And then when they go to the market, the child buys something, like whatever he likes. And then on the dad's birthday, he says, like, I need to wrap it up. Now, 5-year-old child may or may not know how to wrap it up. Certainly when I was 5, I didn't know how to wrap things. So then my mom would wrap it up. And then when my father's birthday would come, I would take that and I would give it to my father. And then my father would become extremely happy. Why would my father become happy? Oh, thank you so much, Madhu. So why would my father become happy? The reason my father would become happy is not because of the gift that I offered to him, because that money was ultimately his. And the effort that was put in by my mother, not by me. All I had was the desire to please him. So when we have the desire to please God, saying thank you, oh thank you Krishna, you have given us so much, and now I want to give something back to you. When we have that natural gratitude towards Krishna, that is what pleases him. And that is one way of certainly developing gratitude. Why? Because then Krishna understands that, okay, this guy knows that ultimately I am the one who has helped him in terms of where he has been. It is explained that the living entity, like us souls, we have been through millions and millions of births, because the soul travels from one body to the other. There are 84 million species of life, it is explained. 84 million species of life, and the last one is a human birth. So we have been through 84 million species of life, and eventually we have got a human birth. And in this human birth, we are just eating, sleeping, doing enjoying ourselves, doing recreational activities, and scrolling on Instagram, and going to parties, and passing our time, essentially. Or what we like to say, we are killing time. Yeah, we like to say that also. That's all we are doing in our lives. So if we're doing things like that in our life, then we don't understand the seriousness of our human life. The purpose of human life is to understand this problem. So the problems that we are talking about right now, that is the purpose of human life, is to understand that we are engaged in all of these kinds of problems and to come up with a solution to how to solve all of these problems also. So then that is why it is said that after this, then when a devotee or when a person becomes naturally obliged to God and starts to dedicate the fruits of his results to God, that is known as Karma Yoga. So we know, I'm sure all of you might have heard Karma Yoga in the different Bhagavad Gita circles. It's a very commonly spoken about topic. But yoga means, does anyone know what yoga means? What is the meaning of yoga? Sorry?
Addition.
Yeah, yoga, one of the meanings of yoga is addition, like one yoga, one is two, like that. Yeah.
Like when you are connected with the higher power.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, actually the meaning of yoga is to connect. So to connect with something that is superior to you. So yoga actually means to connect with the Supreme Lord. Why does it mean to connect with the Supreme Lord and not with anyone else? Because the Supreme Lord is our source. That's whom from we actually emanate. And that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. He says that, just forgetting that verse, but there is one verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that Aham Bija Pradapita, where Krishna says that I am the seed-giving father of all living entities. So all living entities come from me. So because we have a direct connection with Krishna or with the Supreme Lord, ultimately all of our obligations rest in Him. That's the end of which our obligations go to. Like we have immediate obligations to our parents, then we have obligations to the society, then we have obligations to the Pitras, then we have obligations to the Devas and the other animals and other living entities. But then the last obligation that is described in the scriptures is towards the Supreme Lord. So it's explained as Brahman. Brahman means the Supreme Lord. So ultimately all of our obligations end in Krishna or the Supreme Lord. So when we understand this and we become grateful towards the Lord, then we start to experience some kind of satisfaction. So remember I said that there are many different types of problems. And the last problem was the problem of the soul. And this problem of the soul is that we are not satisfied with whatever we are doing. But as soon as we do this process, where we engage or connect with God and we try to offer our results, like whatever we have done, we try to offer at least part of our results to God, then we will find a sense of inner satisfaction, inner peace that comes in within our hearts. This type of peace will be completely different to any kind of peace you might have experienced in your life up until that point, and you will know the difference. This is from practical experience. Many people have said this. Like as soon as they connected to Krishna, it almost felt like there was a light bulb moment. Like it felt like it was something that had never happened in their lives before. All it requires is for us to take a small step towards Him. And why? Because it's a scientific process. Because that is what will ultimately satisfy the soul. The soul is like, the example is given, that it's like a king who is going into the Gold Coast show. Like when the Gold Coast show happens, the king has come, let's say King Charles has come, and he is going into the Gold Coast show with his little child at that time. And then because there's a huge crowd there, the little child wants to go and enjoy. He wants to go and pluck candies or get some cotton candy. So he runs away from his father. Now because there's so many people, the child gets lost and he doesn't know where his father is. So he's trying to look for his father here and there, and he's extremely distressed. He cannot find his father. Meanwhile, the king is also looking for his child, and he doesn't know where his child is. So then someone comes along and he sees that, this child is missing his father, or this child is missing. So he says that, okay, well, let me try to solve the problems of this child. So he says, what is this child's problem? He's crying. So it must be because he's probably hungry. So let me buy him some food. Do you think that will satisfy the child? It may satisfy him temporarily, but this child will eventually again become distressed. Then someone may say, okay, well, maybe he's a bit distressed because he wants to go to his house. Now, I don't know where his house is, so I will just build another house for him. I'll take him to my house and I'll keep him there. Do you think that will satisfy the child? Even that will not satisfy the child, because the child is actually looking for his father. Then some intelligent person comes along and says that actually, rather than solving the immediate concerns of this child, why don't we go and find this child's father? So then when they go and find the king and hand over this little child to his father, then the child becomes very satisfied. So similarly, that's the case with us also. We are also like the little child who was separated from God a very, very, very long time ago. And because it's been a very, very long time ago, we have forgotten that. But in our hearts, we are dissatisfied. Now you may say that, well, I'm not really dissatisfied. I feel like I'm satisfied in my life. But actually, there's a very small test that we can do in our lives to see whether or not we are dissatisfied or satisfied. And that is just determined by how many desires we have. So let's say we mention that, like you're meant to leave your body tonight. Let's say we give you that option that, like you're meant to leave your body tonight. How many people will come up with a list of things they want to do before they die? Like we'll come up with, like, some people will say, oh no, but I haven't been to France yet. Oh no, I haven't done my 7-time world tour yet. Or, oh, I haven't tried pasta from blah, 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 some company, etc. I still have all of these desires. Slowly, slowly, all of these desires will start coming into our heart. And actually that means that we are not satisfied with what we have currently. We still have this desire to enjoy more, go to more different places, and we want to also see more and more things. Or it may be even like work-related things, like, like, oh, I still haven't published my research, or I still have to complete my PhD, etc. We have all of these desires, which means that we are actually not satisfied within our heart. None of us, or maybe hardly any of us, will say, okay, well, if death is coming, that's great. Like, I welcome death. Hardly any of us will do that. That's why, like we have this whole industry of trying to prolong people's lives also. Like the whole, actually, if you look at it in one sense, the whole medical science in one way is to try to prolong people's lives so that people can, I know, because like my father was an oncologist, and he was saying that, like sometimes you would tell people that, they have a terminal cancer, like pancreatic cancer, for example. And then you would give them like 6 months to live. And then generally the doctors would then ask the patient, like, do you have your bucket list of things you want to do before you leave your body? So then patients will come up with their bucket list and stuff. Of course, that doesn't happen in India, because in India they will say, no, doctor, you have to prolong my life. Somehow or the other, you have to prolong life, etc. In India, it's a different case. But over here, people, generally, they come up with lots of bucket lists, like, I want to do this, I want to do that, etc. And that just shows, it's a practical reflection in our lives that we are not satisfied with what we have currently. And this satisfaction can actually only be obtained once we turn our face towards the Supreme Lord. And when we turn our face towards the Supreme Lord, because that eternal connection with Him has been established, then we eventually feel a sense of peace and satisfaction within our heart, and we feel like there is nothing more to be obtained. And in fact, that is what Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita. Towards the end of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that once you have obtained the Supreme, you will get this sense that there is nothing more to be obtained in this material world. You will feel like the whole world is complete. I'm sure most of you are from South India. There is one very famous saint called Kulashekar Alvar. You might have heard Kulashekar Alvar. In his Mukundamala Stotra, he also says, that once Krishna has been seen, or once our Savior has been seen, he says the whole world seems insignificant. There's nothing more for me to obtain in this material world. He says the whole world actually just seems like a speck of dust. He says there's nothing more, nothing more, nothing more, he says. So this is the level that one can go to. So what was Kulashekar Alvar? Kulashekar Alvar was a king, and then eventually he became a sannyasi, because he renounced everything, and then he went and started living in the kingdom. Now to be able to renounce everything, to like give up the kingdom, especially when you have so much opulence, so many servants, and all kinds of luxuries and comforts, etc. It's a very difficult thing. We're not able to give up the small comforts that we have here. But he was a king, and he had everything, and he had no reason to quit. He was very healthy when he quit his body. But because he was deeply satisfied in his heart, he felt that, like, there is nothing more for me to obtain from this kingdom. So he went into Sri Rangam, and he lived the remainder of his life in Sri Rangam. Now here I'm not advocating that we leave all of our jobs and then we go to Sri Rangam and we live there. But the idea is that if we have this sense of detachment, then we won't really be worried too much about what happens with us. We may think that, okay, well, if God desires, that's fine. If God does not desire, that is also fine. So we have this sense of dependency, or we have this sense of surrender onto the Supreme Lord. And that gives a very intense sense of bliss within our hearts. That is what Krishna explains. So then Arjuna says, okay, well, you're saying that, like if someone becomes a devotee of yours, or if someone surrenders onto you, then such a person's life becomes perfect. He says, but how can I know that I have surrendered onto the Lord? What kinds of signs and symptoms will I see in myself to know that I have surrendered onto the Supreme Lord? So it's a very valid question, because I may think that, I've surrendered onto the Lord, but have I really surrendered onto the Lord? So then basically Krishna answers. So in Bhagavad Gita's terms, this is known as a Sthita Pragya. So essentially Arjuna is asking, what are the symptoms of a Sthita Pragya? So then at that point Krishna says that one of the symptoms, he gives many symptoms. The major symptom of a person who has achieved this inner sense of peace and inner sense of satisfaction is that he is not disturbed by outside elements. He is equal in happiness and distress. Now, isn't this something that we all kind of look for? Maybe at once or twice we may have considered this, but we may not have thought about this very often. But won't it be good, if something bad happens to us, that we are able to remain calm? Or if something good happens to us, then we're not that excited. Sometimes we see that, I remember some years ago in Wimbledon, one of the guys, I think it was Nadal or someone, I think he won a match, and then he just after he won the match, he took his racket and just smashed it on the ground. And because of that behavior, he was again suspended. So that was a bit counterproductive for him. But the idea is that some people get extremely happy when they are, when some cause for happiness comes along. And some people become extremely distressed when a cause for distress comes along. We see that, as I gave some examples also, if someone fails in an exam in India, they commit suicide. Now it's an out of proportion response. It's not something that should be done, but some people cannot handle distress also. So don't we admire, for example, when you see a sports match, don't you admire the people who, if they lose, they are still smiling and then they go and shake the other person's hand and say, yeah, that was a good match. We admire these kinds of people. Why? Because we understand that these kinds of people are equal in happiness and distress. And this is something that will develop in us. It is a quality that will develop if we follow this path of Bhagavad Gita nicely. If we practice rules and regulations, and if we develop this sense of detachment, then we can also become like that. We can also, when some cause for distress comes along, we will not be so distressed. And when some cause for happiness comes along, we won't be that excited. Because we know that happiness and distress in this material world are just like waves. Sometimes you'll have something high, then something low. And none of these will last forever. Happiness does not last for a long time, and sadness does not last for a long time. So they all keep going up and down. So similarly, we see Krishna explains that such a person will be equal in honor and dishonor also. Isn't it great if you see someone who is being insulted, that a person does not care about the insult at all? He smiles, takes the insult, and then just gets along with their job. Now that's an admirable quality. And if someone is being praised, they don't become so puffed up. When at work, for example, we see that, if you're praising someone and they become puffed up, we see that most people don't like such people who become puffed up because of their own good qualities. So Krishna says that one who is practicing this path of yoga nicely, such a kind of person will be equal in praise and dishonor also. They are not very much affected by praise and dishonor. Then Krishna also explains that such a person will also be able to navigate through the difficulties of life without any issues. His senses will be under complete control. Now, this is something that happens at a very high level, that your senses stop bothering you as well. So these are some of the symptoms that Krishna explained, that if we practice this path of yoga nicely, then we can reach that level also. So this is something that is admirable, and this is something that we are all actually aspiring for. So what is the end message that comes out of here? So the end message is not that if you practice this path of yoga that all your problems will be solved. No, because as we explained in the beginning, that problems are the very essence of life. If problems are not there, then we are considered to be dead. What Krishna is telling us is that you will have a storm. Like if you're going through a sea, there will always be storms in a sea. But what Krishna does is Krishna gives us an unsinkable ship. You can board on this unsinkable ship and you can cross all of the storms. So if we develop our character in such a way, according to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and by following this yoga process nicely, then we will easily be able to cross over the multiple storms that come through our lives. And that is what Krishna is saying. So we should not think that in the lives of saints or in the lives of pure people, problems are not there. Like for example, we see even in the case of our beloved Srila Prabhupada, who preached the mission of Krishna consciousness throughout the world. He was a pure devotee of God. He had no reason to suffer. But yet we see he faced rejection at every step. Whenever he tried to preach the glories of Krishna, he faced rejection at every step. We see that when he was in India, his own god brothers did not support him. So basically his guru or Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had ordered all of his disciples that I want you to go and preach this knowledge of Krishna consciousness throughout the world, because this is the knowledge that can save everyone. So Srila Prabhupada took this to heart and he said that, okay, yes, I will preach this. But the problem is that all of the other people in India, especially all of his god brothers and all of the people in the mutts, they became very much power hungry at that time. They wanted to maintain their own mutts. They wanted to, they were more interested in maintaining their livelihood in the temple. Whereas Srila Prabhupada was very much focused on preaching. So then he came across some people who were interested in helping him in preaching Krishna consciousness. But then these people also eventually turned against him. Then we see that he went to the West, and when he went to the West, there were also many different types of people who came. In fact, there was one guy, I was reading his pastimes, and this guy was a druggie. He used to live with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada used to live in the same house as him. And one day he took his bat and he was almost about to kill him. So then Srila Prabhupada had to run away from there. But still he did not abandon his idea of preaching Krishna consciousness. So this is the mindset of a person who has completely detached himself from this world, because they don't care about the ups and downs in this world. They're focused on something and they're eventually just, their whole goal and their whole life is directed towards attaining that. So it's not that problems will go away. As I explained, what Krishna does is he gives us a medium, or he gives us a ship through which we can navigate through all of our problems. So as Mataji had requested, how can we solve all of our problems? The first step in terms of solving our problems, what was the very first thing that Arjuna did to solve our problems?
Divide into the levels of
Before that also, what did Arjuna do?
soul and body.
Yeah, before that also he did something. Sorry?
Surrender to the
Yeah, he surrendered to Krishna. So he surrendered to Krishna. So that's the very first thing he did. So, well, we don't see Krishna here. Where is Krishna here? We don't have Krishna. So, but actually Krishna is there. So Krishna explains that anyone who studies the literature of Krishna, or like Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, over there Krishna is there personally. Krishna is personally present in his books. So like for example, Mataji, do you mind showing that book? Yeah, over there we have some books. Yeah. So we have some books here, some Diwali presents. So these are some spiritual books. This is Bhagavad Gita, and one's called Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, and another book's called Life Comes from Life. These are all very scientific books. You can take these books and you can read these, and these books will give you guidance for how to live your life and how to navigate through different types of problems that we may have through our lives, whether they be problems of the body, problems of the mind, problems of the intelligence, or the main problem, which is problem of the soul, where we experience dissatisfaction. So having said that, I will finish there. If anyone has any comments or any questions or anything you even disagree with, that's fine. I'm happy to take that.
I was just going to add isn't that saying that good people face more problems?
Yeah, that is true. Good people it may look like good people are facing more problems. Yeah. So actually the example is given that, it may externally appear that good people are facing more problems, but inside their hearts, they're completely calm. And the example, the analogy is given that let's say there's a storm and you see the ocean. What does it look like? The waves are going up and down, like sometimes even up to a mile. But then if you go deep, do you see any waves? There's nothing happening. It's calm, it's quiet. So superficially, for a nice person or for a devotee of the Lord, it may look like there are lots of problems. But inside their heart, they're not affected at all. So inside their heart, there's a certain sense of peace and satisfaction. So why? Because they have that unsinkable ship, essentially. So that's the main purport there. And we can do this. It's not that this is impractical. If this was impractical, I wouldn't be speaking. It's not just some ideal that we just listen to and we just admire. Actually, this is very relevant, very practical. And we can all do it. And that is why, otherwise Krishna would not give us these instructions in Bhagavad Gita. The reason why Krishna gives us these instructions in Bhagavad Gita is so that we can apply them. And if they were not practical, Krishna would not give them. Unfortunately, we get caught up in very technical language like detachment and vairagya, tapasya and all of that. But actually, now the modern day editions of Bhagavad Gita, they actually translate those words into modern day words so that you can understand what they mean. Because otherwise these topics may seem very irrelevant. Like tapasya, like I'm not doing tapasya here. Like who's doing tapasya? Like we don't do any tapasya. I'm not going to the forest. Like if there's forests left, like yeah, I might have to go to Springbrook or somewhere, but like, even that's not tapasya. So yeah, so it's impractical. So that is why these books nowadays, like modern problems require modern solutions. Yeah, but the knowledge is still old. Yeah, ancient knowledge just presented in a new way. So that's why I would recommend, if you don't have Bhagavad Gita and if you'd like to make your lives perfect, you can please take those books. Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to add or any question? No? No? Okay, all good. Thank you. So we'll finish there and then next part of the program. So, okay, we'll offer the lamps and we'll sing Damodar Ashtakam now. Want to sing, Madhu? Oh, you'll sit there? Okay. I think it turned off again. Yeah. I don't know if it's because of.
Hare Krishna, everybody. We're going to be singing the Damodar Ashtakam now. So it would be nice if everyone could sing along. You can actually take the lyrics out on your phone. It's called Damodar Ashtakam. We are singing the glories of Lord Damodar there, the small childlike form of Krishna. So please bring it up on your phone and we can all sing together.
Everybody can come one after the other to offer the. Yes, please.
Namamishwaram Satchidanandarupa Prasad-Kundalam Namamishwaram Satchidanandarupa Prasad-Kundalam
It's off. No, that's fine. That's fine. Jai.